On this episode of Lapeef Let's Talk,
Paper stay married in order to make sure that their chicks still had their benefits. They had whole nother families. They was living apart. They was doing all of this other type of stuff. So it did not incentivize people to do anything except for to continue to game the system so that they can make sure that they've got all of the benefits that came along with it, but they never changed their lifestyle when they were still living in the worst conditions and the worst possible states that they possibly that ever could exist. And the only thing they got was whatever benefits that they can get as far as what they understood that they could scam out of the government. That's exactly what happened. That's how I know this stuff happens. I literally talk to thousands of people. That's what people do. They still scam and they game the system. It did not change. Women were still having kids with other dudes, and in order to make sure that they still stayed on the benefits of the man, that he was still working at the plant, and people were still doing the same thing. It did not change the dynamic of the household whatsoever, at all. Specifically, and I know with some other people that want to go, but we'll kick it. We got time.
Logic, I like what you were saying. I think that's a good point that you made. And I agree, because I think that when we talk about a gender war, that's why I kept saying, like, I wouldn't reduce the dysfunction that we have to a gender war, because there's a much bigger issue at hand. So my question to you is, what do you think needs to happen? I know that it can, maybe I've heard people say things like, Black women shouldn't, I think you said just now, like, Black women shouldn't take certain things from the government. I don't know. You can clarify that for me, because I don't want to misquote you. But, like, what do you think should happen to make things better? Because I
think if the black community want more marriages and want more households and families, they should incentivize it. Just the same way they incentivize single parent households. I think, in my opinion, if you take the incentive that you give to single parent households and you give it to married people, guess what'll happen?
You mean like at a legislative level, like there needs to be policy put in place?
Yes, because the thing is my point now. Just hear me out now, right? If you take out all these things that incentivize having kids out of wedlock without the father, whether it's Medicaid, welfare, food stamps, year-round tax credits, all that kind of stuff like that. So when a girl is 16, she get pregnant, she knows that the system will incentivize her for having that kid. But what if we take them same things, that same money, and incentivize what Anton talk about all the time, right?
Like healthy marriages and having kids with
marriages.
But
you know what? It doesn't even make sense.
The thing about that
is because marriage people get way more benefits than single people with kids all the way across the board.
But
there's over 1,100 benefits to being married than there are to being single. When I talk about marriage, for example, and I understand what you're saying, Logic, listen, don't shake your head, bro, because I'm not disagreeing with that point, bro.
That, bro. Go ahead.
I'm not disagreeing with that point, right? But what I'm saying is that I don't believe that people want to hear it at all. If I talk about the benefits of marriage and all of the benefits that come along with it, whether it be taxes, whether it be, just all the way across the board of what a successful marriage looks like, people fight against it. They fight against their own best interests. I don't believe that it matters either way. We know that people that have kids out of wedlock that are single are overwhelmingly more poor than people that have it in marriage. We understand that the overwhelming majority of men that are successful and rich are married. That is a fact. That is not anything to even debate. People don't lean on that in order to be able to make their argument or to be able to say, okay, I should do this or I shouldn't do this. We know all the way across the board, it is not a hidden secret that people that are married are overwhelmingly more successful than people that are not. We know that kids that are raised in two-parent households that are married are overwhelmingly more successful than children that are not. This is not a secret. People still don't do the best thing for them, and I don't think that even if you remove the so-called incentives, which I don't look at them as incentives for women to have children out of wedlock, I don't think that it's going to change anything whatsoever.
Okay, so now let me push back on that though. I know JR want to move on to somebody, but
yes, sir.
listen to this, right? If it's a 17-year-old girl,
Yes, sir.
that get pregnant, right? Her parents say, "Hey, we can't take care of this baby," which happen a lot in the Black community. She still choose to have that baby because of what? It's programs that would take care of her and that would take care of her child. They would give her food, they would give her clothing, they would give her shelter. You know what I'm saying? And then in certain states, you got other benefits that you can get for these kids out of wedlock. So now what I'm saying,
17-year-old girl gets pregnant.
let me finish. What I'm saying is this, right? They incentivize it. It's a safety net. If you take that same incentive that you push for that, and then you push, hey, if you get married tomorrow, you will have a $20,000 tax break. And for every year that you successfully married, you get an additional $2,500 tax break. You know how that would change?
What's gonna happen? You know what's gonna happen? People gonna pretend to be married so they can get them bands, and they still gonna be doing the exact same thing that they doing and operating in the exact same way that they doing it. People gonna defraud the system, and it ain't gonna have nothing to do with actually being successfully married. It's gonna be they gonna do that to get them bands. That's what's gonna happen.
So Logic, I like where you're going with this in terms of solutions and things that can happen.
I gotta get to the rest of everybody else.
Things that can happen. The question that I was going to ask you is, you know, we already know who's mostly, you know, in these positions to, you know, create these laws and these policies and whatnot. So like, what can we do as Black people who do not have those positions of power at an overwhelming majority? What can we do right now to move towards what you're saying? Because I feel what you're saying. So what can we do?
We can't do nothing if that safety net exists. They're just like telling somebody to not use, just like we was talking earlier about the women with the leverage. It would be insane for me to tell you women not to use your leverage.
All right, that's I'm gonna move on. Before I do, let me acknowledge these super chats before they get out of control again.
Hold on, JR. Let me just say this one thing. Let me just say this one last thing. You know, one of the jobs that I had was insurance verification. And what we would do is we would go through, and when the economy hit was really, really bad, especially like after 2008, we would go through and companies was trying to save money. So they would hire us to do insurance verification to determine whether or not people should and should be on each other's benefits. People scam the system today based off of being married. That's what we overwhelmingly seeing, is that people were incentivized to, on paper, stay married in order to make sure that their chicks still had their benefits. They had whole nother families. They was living apart. They was doing all of this other type of stuff. So it did not incentivize people to do anything except for to continue to game the system so that they can make sure that they've got all of the benefits that came along with it, but they never changed their lifestyle when they were still living in the worst conditions and the worst possible states that they possibly that ever could exist. And the only thing they got was whatever benefits that they can get as far as what they understood that they could scam out of the government. That's exactly what happened. That's how I know this stuff happens. I literally talk to thousands of people. That's what people do. They still scam and they game the system. It did not change. Women were still having kids with other dudes, and in order to make sure that they still stayed on the benefits of the man, that he was still working at the plant, and people were still doing the same thing. It did not change the dynamic of the household whatsoever, at all.